Hey guys, this is Jon Blau with the Post and Courier, your Clemson reporter. We are here for our weekly countdown to kickoff feature, which is one of a couple non-newspaper features that we do for you guys. There's also our newsletter, the Tiger Take, where I send my stories and just other analysis and things that didn't make the newspaper to your inbox every morning. That you can subscribe to at postandcourier.com/the Tiger Take. But back to this, our countdown to kickoff feature. We're basically going to preview the Wake Forest matchup with Tim Bourret, the former sports information director for Clemson football, long time. Tim, how you doing?
Doing great, John. How are you?
Doing all right. So I guess the first question I'll ask you is, this is the biggest Wake Forest Clemson game since when? When would you feel there's this much consequence to a game with Wake Forest?
Well, there's two ways of looking at it. One is obviously a very consequential game took place in 2008. Maybe we didn't know it going in. As you might know, in 2008, Clemson traveled to Wake Forest. Wake Forest was actually ranked 21st. Clemson was unranked. The Tigers were 3-3 after being ranked in the top 10 in the nation going into the game. Now, Wake Forest had a team with a bunch of really prominent defensive players. There were over 30 NFL scouts there for that game, mostly to see Wake Forest defensive guys. And of course, Clemson had some offensive players. Now, CJ Spiller was a junior, so a lot of people thought he was going to come out, but then he got hurt in that game. And it ended up being a defensive struggle. It was a Thursday night game, by the way, and that Thursday night games always have a lot of NFL scouts because there aren't many other games. And NFL scouts love Thursday night games in the North Carolina area because they can stay over and go to another game on Saturday. But anyway, it ended up being a defensive struggle, 12-7. And that loss led to Tommy Bowden's departure and Dabo Swinney moving up into the head coach position. So that was certainly a game of consequence. This is the highest ranked Wake Forest team Clemson has ever faced. The only thing that's comparable took place in 1979. In 1979, Wake Forest came to Clemson with a 7-1 record, ranked 14th in the nation. And the Tigers, I think, were 5-2, and Clemson won that game 31-0. A sophomore linebacker named Jeff Davis had a 17-yard interception return for a touchdown, was the key to the victory. So those are two that kind of come to mind as being prominent, significant games.
Yeah, and this is just interesting for Wake Forest and for Clemson, obviously, because there's still a chance that Clemson can get to the ACC title game. It's a lot has to happen. I mean, I think Dabo Swinney put it as, we're a wounded dog on the side of the road. We need some people to pick us up and take care of us. But what has to happen is Clemson has to beat Wake Forest. Then they have to hope that Phil Dracovic and Boston College beats Wake Forest the next week as well. And then if Clemson, if they lose, it's over pretty much, right? But if Wake Forest wins, they clinch it. And so it's kind of a, I don't know. It's hard to imagine Wake Forest losing 2 games in a row, but it is still possible. And then Wake Forest obviously wants to just finish it off right here. So I guess, do we think that the fact that there's so much at stake, changes the calculus, kind of changes what kind of game we see? I mean, is there going to be a sense of urgency for both teams, I guess?
Yeah, it could. Now, of course, there's different ways to look at it. Of course, now Wake Forest hasn't really been in this kind of situation before. Certainly none of their current players have. I guess they were in this situation in 2006 when they actually won the ACC championship. But, Clemson's used to playing in big games. William Quackenbush, I didn't check this out myself, but William Quackenbush told me yesterday before I went on air with Ian Kelly that Wake Forest is just 1-15 in their last 16 games in which over 50,000 people have attended the game. So obviously we're going to have more than 50,000 people at the game on Saturday. Also, what you said recently, I guess you should also mention that, NC State still has a chance in this whole thing if Clemson were to win Saturday and then Wake Forest lose to Clemson and Boston College, and NC State win their last two games, which are both at home. So they'll probably be favored, so that, they still have a chance. Also, I got a lot of tweets and messages from people. What happens if there's a three-way tie with Clemson, Wake, and NC State all end up 6-2? The short form answer is NC State wins that tiebreaker. So a lot of people, why is that? Well, because the first tiebreaker in when you have three or more, you would look at what their record is within the Atlantic Division. And in that scenario, Clemson and NC State would both only have one loss. Wake would have two if they lose to Clemson and Boston College. And then you take Clemson and NC State and break that tie simply by looking at the head-to-head, which NC State won. Yeah,
it all reminds me of Zach Galifianakis. I don't know if you saw the movie The Hangover, but he's going to play cards and all of the numbers are popping up in his head. It's a popular GIF on social media. But yeah, just a lot of things going on, a lot of moving parts. It'll be interesting to see how it unfolds. And one of the other interesting things just about this game, what everybody seems to be talking about, is just Wake Forest offense. It's obviously they score a lot of points. That's A, but B, the way they do it, their tempo, they get to the line, got to snap the ball really, really fast, try to get you in a position where you're not lined up. But then when they actually snap the ball, it's the slowest offense you'll see in terms of how the RPOs and all of that work. They have a very slow mesh. So they're basically trying to get people to get out of position, kind of hold their blocks, and then they pick, one of 5-7 different options, whatever it is. Have you seen an offense like this? I mean, is it very unique when you watch it yourself? You've obviously watched a lot of football at this point.
Yeah, I have. And the answer is no. I mean, when Hartman takes that snap and they go to the mesh point, it just reminds me of somebody walking a dog down the street. That's how slow it can be. Now, Clemson's been pretty effective against this Wake Forest offense under Brent Venables, and they've done it by being aggressive and kind of forcing their hand quicker than they want to. And so I think it's very important that Tyler Davis is back, and that Aurora has a good game, and the defensive ends do their job. Not to mention the cat and mouse game we're going to see between Skalski and Hartman, but. John, I'm really surprised. They've been doing this offense for a while, and they've been pretty successful, not to the extent that they are right now. They're actually second in the nation in scoring offense behind Ohio State. They're about 7 points per game ahead of the all-time Wake Forest record for scoring in a season, and they're the only team in the country to score 35 points per game. So, this is kind of a copycat. The whole sport is, whether it be the NFL or college. So I would think I'd see a lot of people wanting to go visit Dave Clawson in the off season from other conferences and studying it even more. But boy, they've been successful against everyone. Now, I don't think they've played a defense as good as Clemson, and I think we're going to be pretty healthy for this game. So it's going to be interesting. The number 2 scoring offense against the number 3 scoring defense.
Right. I guess the only issue for Clemson is I guess the hope is that, the defense can slow down Hartman, can kind of keep the running attack to a minimum. But then the offense has to be able to produce on the other side enough to kind of get you over the hump. And you said, obviously they're healthy for the most part, but Justin Ross did have a stress fracture in his foot that is definitely at least going to hold him out for this game. Joseph Ngano is supposed to be out for a couple of weeks. So we're down to 2 freshmen, Bo Collins, Takari Collins at receiver, and EJ Williams, a sophomore, at receiver. And then obviously the offensive line gets Will Putnam back, but he's been out for a couple of weeks. Do we think this offense is going to have the juice, I guess, to be able to keep up with Wake Forest. I guess, what are you interested in seeing on that side of the ball?
Yeah, actually, I think you misinterpreted what I said. I meant the defense was healthy. Now, yeah, the wide receiver core is wow. I've never seen so many guys. I went to practice yesterday, and Ross was in a boot, and even you go back to Spector, who hasn't played all season. We've got about 5 receivers who are out. So I think getting Putnam back is going to be important. Clemson's going to have to run the ball, but you kind of worry about that because a big part of Clemson being able to run the ball has been that you had a healthy threat from Uiagalelei. He didn't really run the ball last week. Of course, he didn't need to, but is he going to be able to be a threat in the running game? But Clemson will have its top 3 rushers back. And Wake Forest has not been the greatest team in terms of rushing defense. In fact, I have, this stat I tweeted out earlier today that Wake Forest gives up over 200 yards rushing per game, and Clemson 70-1 under Dabo Swinney when they rush for at least 200 yards. So, we'll see. Now we've only had two 200-yard rushing games this year. So, hopefully the Tigers will be able to move the ball on the ground. But yeah, you're going to have to depend on some young players, young receivers, both Collinses, who have both had good games, but they've also had some drops too. You would think that Clemson would throw the ball to the tight end a little bit more in this game. Allen has been very reliable, and this Briningstool kid, I think, is going to be a star of the future. He's very highly recruited out of high school, had 2 nice catches when thrown to him this past Saturday.
Yeah, and he was considered the number 1 tight end prospect in the country when he came in, Jake Briningstool, and he's really exploded. I remember that touchdown catch he had last week. I mean, that was just a nice jump ball throw by Billy Wiles. I thought maybe he was going to go over his head and get intercepted. He comes down with it, 25-yard touchdown grab. He looked really good there. And Takari Collins was the leading receiver last week with 97 yards on 6 catches. Obviously, almost had that touchdown on the road that wasn't a touchdown. Or was that on the road, or was that at home versus Florida State? Now I'm questioning myself.
I was on the road at Louisville.
It's on the road to Louisville, yeah, where there was just a little bit of a line there. It looked like he might have been in bounds. But I guess, do you remember a time when the receiving core was this young? I mean, and I guess it's exciting in a way because there is potential for the future with these guys, but then also, having them produce in the short term is another thing, I guess.
Right. Now I remember when we had a young receiving core way back in 1983, we had Terrence Rulak and Ray Williams were both our top receivers, and they were both freshmen. But, in those days, we didn't throw the ball that much. I think they both had maybe 20 catches over the course of the season. But they went on to be very good players the rest of their career. But that's the only other time I can remember having, 2 freshmen that they were leading receiver. Now, obviously, in 1983, we never ran a single play with 4 wideouts in the same game. So, we always had 2 or 3 running backs in those days. But certainly important positions and great opportunities for Collins. Just feel bad for Ross, obviously, who's had a great career. He did get 46 catches this year for over 500 yards. And mentally, he had to overcome a lot. His back surgery was very difficult. And, just to get that confidence, back. And then, I didn't even know that he had played with a stress fracture for most of the season, which, can be done. Maybe it's a little harder in football and basketball. I remember Dale Davis his junior year when we won the ACC regular season in 1990, he played the last 2 months of the season with a stress fracture. Now, Dale was about as tough a basketball player as we've ever had. But he did get through this season and had an all ACC year.
Yeah, I would think that both things would hurt. I think jumping and doing all of that with a stress fracture would hurt. And I think doing all the cutting that Justin Ross was doing on routes would hurt. But I guess he was okay. And Dabo Swinney talked about that, It happened before the Georgia game. It's like this guy comes back, man, he gone through all this stuff, and then he, hurts his foot, and actually came out as a rumor that he had broken his foot was what came out, and that was wrong. It was obviously just a hairline stress fracture. But yeah, for him to kind of power through all that, and obviously the one down play of the year that everybody's going to remember is the pick six, and Dabo said he didn't quite run the right route, but he remembers telling him after the game, I was happy you were here to make these mistakes, to make mistakes. So the fact that he's even playing football is remarkable given.
Yeah, because there were a lot of doctors who thought initially that you're never going to play football again after they looked at his neck situation. But there was one doctor in Pittsburgh who I guess had done that surgery before and thought he had a chance to come back. So we probably not going to see Ross play for the Tigers again, but we I just think back to those back-to-back games he had in the playoffs in 2018 when he had 150 yards receiving in both games, that 100 catch he had against Alabama that year. And then he had a terrific year in 1,000-yard season in 2019 also. So we just hope he can get healthy and have a nice pro career.
Yeah. And, again, about the running game, this was another interesting note that came out of the press conferences. Jordan Mcfadden will definitely be back next year, is what Dabo Swinney said. He's a redshirt junior, trending towards an NFL prospect. He's had a really good year. I think it's just kind of been under the radar with everything else that's been going around him. The other interesting thing is Will Putnam is a sophomore in Dabo Swinney's book. He played in 11 games as a freshman, 12 as a sophomore, but he gets that COVID year. So he gets to he's going to have another 2 years, hopefully, on that offensive line. So when you look at that group, they're all going to be together next year. Most of them will be back the year after that too. Clemson has a chance to really grow in the running game, especially when you look at Kobe Pace, Will Shipley, and Phil Maffa, being two freshmen and a sophomore. So I guess how impressive has the running game been at times? Obviously, maybe he's took a little bit of a step back against UConn because of all the shuffling on the interior line. But I guess is the hope that with Will Putnam back and all of these guys back who've been playing together a bunch, they can really get some forward momentum. I guess is that the strength of this Clemson offense potentially?
Yeah, I think it certainly can be in the future. The offensive line experience in the offensive line is really an important thing. In 1985 we had a really young offensive line starting a bunch of freshmen and sophomores, and Clemson ended up with a 6-6 record. But boy, when those guys were juniors and seniors, Clemson went 10-2 both years and finished in the top 10 in the country in the final polls. And historically, I remember I did a note. It hasn't been updated since I retired, but over a 25-year period, I took the starting lineups and when every of the 5 offensive linemen for Clemson were either redshirt juniors or seniors, Clemson averaged 9.5 wins in those seasons. And when they had a younger offensive line, it wasn't nearly as good. So, of course, those were years that the running game was the staple for Clemson, but it's still important, obviously, today. So, yeah, hopefully going forward, you got a lot of these teams that we're playing against have veteran lines with guys in their 5th and 6th years from COVID getting the extra years. But Clemson should have some experience advantage next year. And of course, we don't know about, that there's 3 offensive linemen who were hurt this year that got redshirted. It'll be interesting to see how good they'll be after spring practice and be coming back healthy.
Yeah, that's John Williams, Dietrich Pennington, Taquan Johnson. So a ton of injuries. I mean, it's just, again, if you go through the list and then all the midseason transfers, which is a new thing, just a ton of attrition, a ton of things this Clemson teams has had to endure this year. And I guess I really wanted to bend it back to the offensive line to ask you, have you gotten a Ship Happens t-shirt yet? And were you not surprised at all when Dabo said that became a t-shirt?
Well, no, I was not. I think it's pretty good. Although I have an idea for a different t-shirt for him that I have not talked to will about. But in light of the, kind of surprising great plays that he makes, and maybe I'm older than most people that used to go to a museum called Ripley's Believe It or Not. I thought a good T-shirt would be Shipley Believe It or Not. So I don't know if he can get another one going. He's probably just working on the other one, but yeah, I might broach that one with him in the off season.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess he's just a freshman. He's got plenty of years.
Plenty of time.
Yeah, the ship happens. It's going to wear off maybe around sophomore season, junior season. We'll come around with some different. Yeah. So yeah, I guess to jump back around to the defensive side of the ball. I mean, one of the other interesting things that Dabo said was A.T. Perry. He's a little T. Higgins-esque, a tall, rangy receiver. Going to cause some problems for the Clemson secondary, and they take a lot of shots. I mean, if you look at Sam Hartman's stats last week, the last couple of weeks, less than 50% completion. He's thrown 5 interceptions, but they just keep throwing it deep. So it's going to be a little bit of a challenge for the secondary to obviously not give up any big plays. Andrew Booth Jr. is going to be back. I guess that helps. But I guess thinking that this Clemson secondary has the discipline and the makeup, I guess, to deal with a receiver who's T. Higgins-esque, I guess.
Yeah, I guess I was at practice yesterday and Booth was full go, so I guess Booth would be on Perry, although they got so many good receivers. Perry's 5th in the ACC in receiving yards per game, but his teammate Roberson is right behind him at 86 yards per game. Perry's got 11 touchdowns. Roberson's got 8. But Perry's kind of looked at as the big play guy, 19.5 yards per reception. So it will be, it's going to be fascinating. But I'll match Clemson's defensive backs, cornerbacks up against anyone, but they'll be tested this week because you look at statistically, what they have accomplished. Now, the fascinating thing is going back to what I said earlier was about Clemson's ability to disrupt that mesh point. I've noticed a lot of passes this year from Hartman, out of that the mesh point where he stops and he's only like 2 yards behind the original line of scrimmage when he's throwing it. So if the Tigers can get in there and disrupt them, and they won't have as much of a chance to throw the ball downfield as maybe they have done against some of the other teams.
Yeah, I think Roro's had a couple of knockdowns. I mean, he's a former basketball player, so he's a shot blocker. So he can get in there and block some passes. Tyler Davis, obviously, he's got 1.5 good arms, but I mean, I could see him getting his arm around. So it's, it will be interesting to see how they do. And just a finale for guys like James Skalski, Nolan Turner, Balin Spector. I guess, can you put into words? I mean, I could try, but you probably could do it better. What James Skalski and Nolan Turner and Balin Spector and all those guys have meant to kind of Clemson over the last few years. I mean, what it's going to be like, I guess, next year when they're not around. I mean, how strange is that going to be?
Yeah, it's hard to put a number on, coaches on the field, but I'm trying to think where it was. There was one game. I guess was it at Syracuse? Anyway, we weren't getting the defensive call in fast enough and ended up having to call a timeout. And Skalski went over and was pretty demonstrative and was talking to the coaches about getting it in. I thought to myself, only a 6th-year senior like Skalski could probably get away with that. But, he was right. He had a sense of urgency and everything he was doing. He was the guy who had to, make the calls. But a terrific leader, one of the smartest linebackers that I've seen. One little story on each guy. Skalski in 2016 at the middle of the season, his father passed away, and that was a Friday before a game. And of course, I was still working full time, and I could see that everything was delayed and there was something going on, and everything stopped. For Dabo and Brent Venables to get with him and, just help him go through, because it was a sudden death. and Dabo arranged to get somebody to drive him to Atlanta so he wouldn't be by himself trying to drive, because he knew it would be I really just saw Dabo and Venables as dads that day, and I'll always remember that. And Nolan Turner, I did a interview with him with Jack Ford for 60 Minutes on Sports. They were doing a feature on his father, who of course lost his life to ALS just the preceding June. And so I spent a good bit of time with Nolan that day. We were outside. They wanted to do the interview outside in the stadium in the cold, and it was dark. And but he was very mature about it. He answered all the tough questions, and he hadn't played yet, but I could see this kid was really a sharp kid and was going to be a leader for us. And he's really had a terrific career. I mean, he made All-American, which nobody ever thought he would. He saved the Ohio State game in 2019 with a game-ending interception. He's really done a good job.
Yeah, and his dad obviously was Kevin Turner, who was a fullback in the NFL. I grew up in the Philadelphia, New Jersey / New Jersey area, and so I actually watched Kevin Turner when he was a player. So it was interesting to come here and hear about Nolan, obviously, and he's had a great career. Also, Brian Dawkins's son played here, and also
You got Trotter
Jeremiah
now.
Trotter. Yeah, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., who's
Yeah.
so yeah, no, you watch these guys grow up. It's interesting to see kind of what they meant. I think I also heard another story about Skalski. I think it was from Grace Rayner. She wrote about him a couple years ago or a year ago, and it was that, in high school it was like his last game, and the other team was just struggling so bad. They were jumping off sides, making all these mistakes. It upset Skalski because he wanted to play more football. So he's literally telling the other team how to line up. It's like, you're supposed to be here, you're supposed to be there, do this, because he wanted them to get the playoff. I mean, yeah, it just sounds like he loves football, and he even brought that up. We asked him about this, just a very different year, not what you're used to. And he said, I'm having more fun playing football than I ever have in my life. So just a guy who really loves to play football. I think, the Death Valley faithful will be there and definitely give him a send-off, and I'm sure he'll be crying. There'll be some emotions there. But I guess, what do you think that's going to be like between the fans and Skalski and Turner, just the players that have meant so much over the last few years?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You talk about, I mean, they all know their leadership qualities, and just, a 6 year guy, especially Skalski, who's actually played in all 6 seasons. Turner redshirted and didn't play in a game in 2016, but Skalski, I guess he's going to get to 70 games in his career, which is just mind-boggling. That's probably never going to happen again. But he's just been a great representative of the school. He kind of reminds me of Ben Boulware, who was great senior linebacker on our 2016 team, a great leader, and he I guess he was with Ben actually that season. So I think he'll get a great reception as he comes down the hill for the last time. I meant to ask him this week how many times he's actually come down the hill. I know that the last 4 years, this will be the 26th home game, but I assume he's been around for the other 12 or 13 that we had in the 2 years before that. So he's probably come down the hill more than any other player too.
Yeah, and Gathering at the Paul will be back this week, is what I've heard. So fans will be able to, and I guess embrace, in a way, the team in a way they haven't all season. So
yeah,
that'll be
I'll
interesting.
look forward to that.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, we're running out of time. It's our half hour. Anything else you want to add, Tim? Anything you're looking forward to most, or the keys of the game?
No, I'm just fascinated to see the Clemson defense against Wake Forest offense. Really nationally strong in both of those categories, and can Clemson disrupt at the line of scrimmage? Wake Forest, and they've been just every game 35 points is just amazing. So obviously I think they're going to have to hold them under that for Clemson to win the game. That, and I think overall key is Clemson's ability to run the ball. I think that's going to be huge.
All right, so that's our talk for this week. Thanks, guys, for joining. Again, the Tiger Takes, my newsletter, postandcourier.com/the Tiger Take if you want to subscribe to that. And as always, thanks, Tim, for coming by and talking with us.
Good to be with you, John.
All right, we'll see you.